Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're unraveling the astonishing story behind one of Hollywood's most celebrated actresses, Vivien Leigh. From her unstoppable libido and rumored possession to the medical treatments she endured, Vivien's life was marked by both dazzling fame and heartbreaking turmoil. So, grab a seat and get ready for a deep dive into one of the most captivating and tragic tales of the golden age of Hollywood. Childhood British actress Vivien Leigh, some pronounced her name as Leigh, and both are phonetically correct, won the Academy Award for Best Actress twice for her pivotal roles as Blanche DuBois in the movie adaptation of A Streetcar Named Desire and as Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. She was also honored with a Tony Award for her performance in the Broadway musical Tovarish. Named the 16th Best Female Movie Star of Classic Hollywood Cinema by the American Film Institute in 1999, she did experience periods of inactivity in her career. Still, she performed in comedies by Noel Coward and George Bernard Shaw, as well as Shakespearean classics, Ophelia, Cleopatra, Juliet, and Lady Macbeth. During the course of her 30-year career, she appeared in a few films as a character actress later in life. Vivien Leigh was widely considered one of the most beautiful actresses of her day. Directors emphasized her beauty in most of her films. When asked if she believed her beauty had been a hindrance to being taken seriously as an actress, she said, "People think that if you look fairly reasonable, you can't possibly act. And as I only care about acting, I think beauty can be a great handicap if you really want to look like the part you're playing, which isn't necessarily like you." She developed a reputation for being difficult to deal with and suffered from chronic tuberculosis, which ultimately caused her death at the young age of 53. She also battled bipolar disorder for a significant portion of her life. Vivien Leigh's childhood name was Vivien Mary Hartley, born on November 5, 1913, in the British Indian city of Darjeeling in the province of Bengal. She was the only child of British stockbroker Ernest Richard Hartley and his wife Gertrude Mary Frances. Her Scottish father was born in 1882, and her Roman Catholic mother, who was of Irish, Parsi Indian, and Armenian descent, was born in Darjeeling in 1888. On her mother's side, Vivien had grandparents who still lived in India when she became famous. According to historians, she hid her Indian heritage from Hollywood to avoid being reduced to stereotypical roles or facing discrimination. Hollywood was very racist at that time, so many starlets had to hide who they truly were just to get roles. Vivien made her stage debut at the tender age of 3, reciting Little Bo Peep with her mother's amateur theater troupe. Her mother wanted to foster a love of books in her daughter and read aloud to her everything from Greek mythology and Indian folk tales to the works of Hans Christian Andersen, Lewis Carroll, and Rudyard Kipling. At 6 years old, Vivien was transferred to a boarding school, where she met another future actress, Maureen O'Sullivan. Vivien told Maureen, who was 2 years older, that she wanted to become a great actor someday. Her father later withdrew her from school, and the family traveled around Europe for 4 years. Vivien studied in places like the Sacred Heart in San Remo on the Italian Riviera, and in Paris, where she picked up French and Italian. The family returned to Britain in 1931. After seeing O'Sullivan appear in a film, Vivien told her parents she wanted to be an actress too. Her father quickly enrolled her at London's Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. Family in 1917, her father was transferred to Bangalore as an officer in the Indian Cavalry. Because of that, Vivien spent part of her early childhood in India. Despite coming from a relatively privileged background, Vivien's decision to marry Lee Holman, 13 years her senior, reflects the tension between social expectation and her own artistic drive. At that time, women who married were generally expected to focus on domestic life. Lee's disapproval of theatrical people must have been a significant hurdle, causing Vivien to leave RADA. For a woman so gifted and ambitious, that compromise likely became unsustainable in the long run. Motherhood came swiftly with the birth of her daughter, Suzanne, when Vivien was only 19. Balancing familial duties with the early stirrings of a professional acting career would prove challenging, especially given her husband's reservations about the stage. Yet the flame of her artistic passion was not easily extinguished. Friends encouraged her to take a small role in Things Are Looking Up, pushing her one step closer to stardom. Her agency's insistence that she change her name underscores the Hollywood obsession with branding. Vivien Holman lacked the pizzazz they craved. Vivien Leigh was transitional, but Vivien Leigh had a concise, elegant resonance, ideal for marquee billing. This transformation was both practical and symbolic. She was carving out a new identity distinct from her married life, inching toward the celebrity she would eventually become. Vivien Leigh's career trajectory reads like a classic Hollywood screenplay, packed with ambition, near disasters, and ultimate triumph. It all began in 1935, when she stepped onto the stage in Sidney Carroll's The Mask of Virtue. This role put her on the map almost overnight. Rave reviews, glowing newspaper articles, and interviews that painted her as the next British star to watch. At that point, few could have imagined she'd soon take on the challenge of a lifetime, convincing David O. Selznick she was the perfect Scarlett O'Hara for his adaptation of Gone with the Wind. What's fascinating is Vivien didn't just quietly audition for the role. After reading Margaret Mitchell's novel, she insisted her American agent recommend her to Selznick, despite him declaring her too British. That perseverance set the tone for her approach to acting. If she believed in a part, she fought for it. She traveled all the way to Los Angeles, auditioning and ultimately proving Selznick wrong by capturing the fiery essence of Scarlett. This moment showcased her unyielding drive. She wasn't content to wait and see if fate would bring her the part, she actively took hold of her destiny. Yet, filming Gone with the Wind was anything but glamorous. She clashed with director Victor Fleming, having preferred the more nuanced guidance of George Cukor, who'd been fired. Worse yet, the schedule was merciless. She sometimes worked 7 days a week, often late into the night. This punishing regimen took a toll on her health and mental well-being, chain-smoking 4 packs a day, relying on sleeping pills to keep going, and once even overdosing at her lowest point. She had more lines than Clark Gable but received significantly less pay, a stark reflection of the gender inequities embedded in the studio system. Despite these hardships, the cast and crew produced a masterpiece. Gone with the Wind swept the Oscars, earning 10 Academy Awards overall, including Best Actress for Vivien. You'd think that level of acclaim would mark a satisfying conclusion to any career story, but Vivien was far from done. She later won another Oscar as Blanche DuBois in A Streetcar Named Desire, a role often cited as one of the greatest film performances ever, ironically tapping into themes of fragility and inner turmoil that echo her own life. She even conquered the stage once more, bagging a Tony Award for her work in the Broadway musical Tovarish, proving she wasn't merely a Hollywood sensation but a versatile performer who thrived on live theater's immediacy. Beyond her achievements, Vivien's name became synonymous with ethereal beauty. During Hollywood's golden age, image was everything, and she was famously insecure about her lower lip, so much so that she'd draw it on larger for a fuller look. She maintained a personal beauty regimen distinct from many of her contemporaries, only wearing eyeshadow at night, indulging in regular facials, and removing makeup with oil. In an era when strict diets were popular, she proudly refused to restrict herself, emphasizing that she loved food and prioritized relaxation above all. A 1951 Lydia Lane article captured this philosophy perfectly. An ability to relax is the most important thing of all, she stated. If she had just 10 spare minutes, she'd train herself to sleep, a remarkable routine for someone who lived under near constant studio pressure. This blend of grit and grace defined her career. While Gone with the Wind and A Streetcar Named Desire remain her signature triumphs, her willingness to battle skepticism, whether it was over her accent, her capabilities, or even her very worth on a male-dominated set, cements her legacy. Behind every polished Hollywood legend lies a story of real struggle. In Vivien's case, it was the relentless stress of shooting marathon scenes, the disparity in wages, and her own insecurities about appearance. Yet she emerged from these hurdles, trophy in hand, admired by audiences and critics alike. From the British stage to the Technicolor sprawl of 1939 Atlanta, she pursued roles with laser-focused conviction, pushing through extreme fatigue and emotional lows that would have overwhelmed most people. Even decades later, her performances, fueled by an electric mix of vulnerability and fiery determination, still captivate us. Whether you see her as the spirited Scarlett or the tragically delicate Blanche, Vivien's path reminds us that no amount of on-set chaos or personal doubts can stifle genuine talent and an indomitable will to succeed. Scandal as her star rose, rumors circulated that Vivien Leigh was possessed by a demon. Unfortunately, the limited understanding of mental health at the time meant many dismissed her behavior as something supernatural. She suffered from bipolar disorder, which in her case included sudden mood swings, episodes of rage, and an increased libido. Because of that powerful drive, she is said to have had affairs with delivery men, taxi drivers, really, whomever she encountered when she was in the grip of these impulses. Some in Hollywood labeled her possessed because, during her manic episodes, her voice and demeanor would change drastically, and afterward, she would have no memory of the event. In popular culture, when someone exhibits signs of mania, there's often speculation about demonic involvement, especially in Hollywood, where conspiracies about occult practices persist. There are indeed artists and celebrities who worship or pay homage to certain spirits, so people are quick to assume demonic possession. Coming from a Haitian background myself, I know of cases where spiritual possession can cause someone to act in ways they don't remember, adopting a different voice, or trying to harm themselves or others. But in Vivien's case, it could simply have been her mental illness rather than anything supernatural. She also had intense outbursts, her voice would turn harsh and scornful, her eyes would grow cold, and then she'd snap out of it, not remembering what had happened. This pattern led many to speculate about demonic possession. However, it is more likely attributable to her untreated bipolar disorder at a time when mental health knowledge was minimal. Marriage. Before meeting Laurence Olivier, Vivien Leigh had been married to Lee Holman. Despite his dislike of theatrical life, they married anyway, and she had her daughter Suzanne with him. Then came Olivier. She first saw him in a play, The Mask of Virtue. She reportedly told a friend, "That's the man I'm going to marry," ignoring the fact that both of them were already married, he to Jill Esmond, and she to Lee Holman. Vivien took the bold step of visiting Olivier in his dressing room, striking up a conversation, kissing him on the neck, and sashaying out. They fell for each other, but their spouses initially refused to grant them divorces. During their years together, both lovers faced Lee's crippling bipolar episodes. Performing as Ophelia in Hamlet, she once stormed into her dressing room, screaming at Olivier, then instantly stopped and acted like nothing had happened. When Leigh won her Oscar for Gone with the Wind, Olivier admitted he was so jealous he almost hit her with it. Their relationship turned volatile because of her increasing bouts of mania, mood swings, and strong sensual appetites. Olivier tried various ways to help her, even committing her to an asylum at one point, where she endured electroshock therapy. Ultimately, after more than 20 years of marriage, the strain became too great. In 1960, Olivier divorced her and went on to marry Joan Plowright, while Vivien entered a relationship with actor Jack Miravalli. Other relationships. Vivien Leigh's personal life often looked like a tempest at sea, always churning, rarely calm, and frequently tossed by forces she couldn't quite control. Nowhere is that more evident than in her other relationships, which took shape alongside the turmoil in her marriage to Laurence Olivier. While the public might have seen Vivien and Olivier as the ultimate power couple, the truth is that behind closed doors, her emotional extremes and hypersexual impulses propelled her into a series of affairs that fascinated, and sometimes alarmed, the people around her. One of the most striking examples is Peter Finch, an actor whom Olivier discovered in Australia. Initially, Olivier saw Finch as a promising talent he could mentor, perhaps even a younger version of himself in the making. Instead, Finch wound up entwined with Vivien in a passionate affair. We need to remember that by 1948, Olivier was already worn down by Vivien's dramatic mood swings and heightened sexual needs, enough so that he openly admitted feeling relieved that she had focused her desire on someone else. Imagine the awkwardness of your protégé becoming romantically involved with your wife, and at the same time, feeling a strange sense of gratitude for the reprieve. That contradiction underscores just how exhausted Olivier had become. From Finch's own perspective, intimacy with Vivien was like being high, so intense and enveloping that it felt addictive. But what began as a thrilling, perhaps flattering, relationship eventually took on a darker tone. Finch referred to her relentless drive for satisfaction as a kind of sickness, hinting at the way her episodes of mania could transform even her most intimate encounters into overwhelming events. This commentary from Finch is particularly poignant. He knew he'd stepped into a fire, attracted by its warmth and brilliance, only to find it scorching and all-consuming. After a while, even he got tired, an echo of what Olivier had experienced for years. Yet these affairs weren't merely private matters. Vivien's mental health struggles caused her to act out in ways that became public knowledge. There's the infamous episode when she wandered into the streets naked, a shocking sight in any era, but especially in the buttoned-up 1940s and 50s, where scandalous headlines could ruin careers overnight. On more than one occasion, she had to be physically restrained, underscoring the severity of her episodes. It's one thing to deal with emotional volatility in private, but quite another to repeatedly intervene in public breakdowns, particularly when the paparazzi or curious onlookers might seize upon the moment, fueling even more sensational stories. Despite all these hardships, Vivien didn't simply disintegrate into chaos. After her divorce from Olivier, she found comfort in a new relationship with Jack Marivalli, a man who promised Olivier that he would look after her. That promise speaks volumes. It suggests a caretaker dynamic rather than a simple romance. Marivalli took on a role similar to a guardian, reflecting just how fragile Vivien could become when her bipolar disorder flared. It's as if everyone around her understood she needed a stabilizing presence, somebody willing to ensure her safety and emotional well-being in moments when she couldn't do so herself. In today's world, we might describe that arrangement as part caretaker, part companion, and part romantic partner. But in mid-20th century Hollywood, it was rare to discuss mental health openly, so such relationships often blurred the line between love and obligation. One aspect we haven't really touched upon, though it's central to understanding Vivien's other relationships, is the broader Hollywood environment at the time. Studios, gossip columnists, and movie bosses thrived on scandal and intrigue, yet they also fiercely protected their most valuable stars from damaging exposure. In Vivien's case, it was a delicate balance. Her star power was undeniable, but her behavior risked overshadowing her career highlights. Being naked in public or having a widely known affair with an up-and-coming actor could derail her marketability if the studios or press decided to make an example of her. That she continued to find work and remain in the public's good graces suggests there was also a network of enablers, people who hid or downplayed her most erratic episodes so she could continue filming and maintain her image. Moreover, looking at these affairs solely as salacious drama would be missing the deeper tragedy. Vivien Leigh was wrestling with untreated bipolar disorder, a condition that can hijack a person's desires, fears, and sense of self. So while one might be tempted to describe her as a scandal-plagued actress drawn to dangerous liaisons, it's more accurate to say she was a profoundly talented individual, suffering from a mental illness that led to behaviors both mesmerizing and destructive. The men in her life, whether it was Olivier or Finch, were occasionally enthralled, occasionally horrified, and frequently helpless in the face of her extremes. Finally, there's the heartbreak of realizing how these affairs and public incidents often overshadowed her deeper need for understanding and genuine psychiatric support. The tabloids would zero in on the naked in the streets headlines, while the personal turmoil fueling such an episode received scant sympathy. The romantic entanglements with Finch or others became Hollywood chatter, while the fact that she was in the throes of a manic episode went unrecognized. Even Jack Marivalli's promise to Olivier underscores a tacit acknowledgement that Vivien needed consistent emotional protection, not just a marital partner. In Vivien's era, she essentially had to navigate a minefield of gossip, societal judgment, and limited medical solutions. That she found temporary solace with Marivalli is at least one bright spot in a narrative that can otherwise feel heartbreakingly chaotic. When we step back, it becomes clear that her romantic life was never just about intrigue for the tabloids. It was tied intimately to her struggle for stability in a world that was more interested in her star power than her well-being. Death. Vivien Leigh's final chapter began years before 1967. Back in 1943, she contracted tuberculosis while volunteering for Allied forces in North Africa, an experience that not only demonstrated her desire to support the war effort but also foreshadowed a long and grueling battle with illness. Although doctors believed she had beaten tuberculosis in 1944, the infection remained hidden in her body. The sense of relief she and those around her felt at that time was short-lived. During the filming of Caesar and Cleopatra in 1945, Vivien suffered a terrible fall while carrying a child in one of the scenes. Not only did she lose the baby due to this accident, but the emotional shock plunged her into a deep depression that hovered over her for the rest of her life. This incident, miscarriage compounded by physical injury, took a toll on her already fragile health. Tuberculosis, even when dormant, can flare up under stress or compromised immunity, and Vivien's frequent bouts of depression, along with her intensive work schedule, likely wore her down further. Over the subsequent 2 decades, her tuberculosis resurfaced intermittently, culminating in its most severe recurrence in 1967. By that point, Vivien was only 53 years old but had already lived through relentless cycles of illness, a punishing film and stage career, and profound personal struggles. She was at home in London, attempting to rest and recuperate. On what appeared to be a normal day, she got out of bed to use the bathroom, collapsed, and never recovered. Her sudden passing underscored the unpredictable nature of tuberculosis. Even after periods of apparent remission, the disease could strike with lethal force. In a poignant turn of events, Laurence Olivier, her former husband and creative partner, from whom she had been separated for 7 years, rushed to her side upon hearing the news. Whatever emotional distance had grown between them dissolved in that crisis. Olivier stayed with her body until the authorities arrived, later helping plan her funeral. Finally, her ashes were scattered near her favorite house, a quiet farewell befitting a woman who had lived under the glare of worldwide fame but longed, in her last years, for a measure of peace. In many ways, her untimely death at 53 served as a somber reflection of a life marked by both monumental achievements and inescapable tragedy, an elegant, iconic star who, despite her undeniable brilliance, could not entirely escape the shadows of illness and personal sorrow. And that's a wrap on the incredible yet harrowing journey of Vivien Leigh, an actress whose talent burned bright enough to earn her the industry's highest accolades, but whose private battles sometimes overshadowed her success. Whether it was the whispers of demonic possession, the unchecked sexual compulsions, or the tragic consequences of her illnesses, Vivien Leigh's story reminds us that the glitz of stardom can hide unimaginable pain. I hope this video sheds light on the human side of a true Hollywood legend. If you found this insight into her life compelling, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the lives of history's most fascinating figures. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the stories that shaped Hollywood's golden age.